Welcome to SportsBeat KC, presented by Big O Tires. It's Friday, November 8th, and I'm your host, Blair Kirchhoff. It's a huge college football weekend, nationally and locally. The headliner is LSU at Alabama, with a nice undercard of Penn State at Minnesota. The spotlight shines on teams closer to home as well. Kansas State rides into Texas, looking for its fourth straight triumph. It's been quite a run for the Wildcats. 2 weeks ago, they picked up a signature victory at Oklahoma, and they followed that with a throttling of rival Kansas. Beat the Longhorns on Saturday, and K-State will find itself thinking about a spot in the Big 12 championship game. Kansas State beat writer Kellis Robinett joins me to break down the game, and we get in a little hoops talk as well. Texas played in last year's Sugar Bowl. So did Georgia, Missouri's opponent, on Saturday. Since their 5-game winning streak, the Tigers have had a rough go, losing consecutive games at Vanderbilt and Kentucky when Mizzou was favored in both. It's been a puzzling time for the program, but it has a big opportunity in Athens on Saturday. Missouri beat writer Souichi Terada talks Tigers with me. Finally, we hear from Chiefs rookie safety Juan Thornhill. He's been a bright spot for the defense all season, and among the topics he covers with the star Sam McDowell is how he had to make a name for himself coming out of high school in Virginia. All of this on SportsBeat KC. Let's check in with Kellis. Kellis Robinett covers Kansas State, and he's in the crossover season of football and basketball, and things are going pretty well for both teams. But let's start with football, Kellis. That was a resounding victory for the Wildcats over KU last Saturday, and it occurred to me that following the Oklahoma victory and then TCU before then, this 3-game winning streak that the Wildcats are on with an opportunity for a big one at Texas on Saturday. This has been a great stretch for Chris Klein and his program after it looked like, they had lost a couple in a row, and I was kind of wondering what this season was going to be about for them. And now, they're back. They're in the polls. They're in the college football playoff rankings. This is a good time for K-State football.
Yeah, it's a heck of a time for them. I don't think a lot of people saw them debuting at number 16 in the college football rankings last night, but shoot, they'll take that. That's a great deal of respect from the playoff committee right there. And you talk about, having things to play for. Not only are they on a 3-game winning streak, but they're still in the mix for a Big 12 championship. If they can beat Texas and stay in a roll, there's no reason why they can't catch Baylor or Oklahoma if one of them were to slip up down the stretch. And at number 16, that keeps them alive for a really, really good bowl game, one of the New Year's Six. And if, the sky's the limit right now. If they keep doing what they're doing, they could wind up in a very good bowl game at the end of the year.
And look, I saw where they're an underdog against the Longhorns, and it's going to be a big challenge for sure. Texas feels like it's got a lot to play for as well. But I don't know. I look at the schedule. Once you got Oklahoma and Baylor out of the way, at least for this year anyway, it seems manageable to me. It's getting to 6 wins, which is what K-State did last week with the victory over Kansas. They get the bowl eligibility thing out of the way. Let's see how much is out there for the Wildcats. Remind us quickly what after the Sugar Bowl. What's the pecking order? Does it go Alamo Bowl after that for the Big 12?
It's changed a little bit, but the number 1 bowl outside of the playoff affiliated ones is the Alamo, followed by the Camping World in Orlando, and then I think next is Texas and Liberty. And then after that, you get down to the Cheez-It Bowl and the whatever they call the bowl in Dallas at the old Cotton Bowl.
Right. Okay, so Kansas State fans can plan on going bowling. That they didn't have that last year. That's going to happen this year, and now it's just a matter of how far this team can go in the regular season. But they did get a piece of bad news this week with A.J. Parker. Tell us about that.
Yeah, he came up lame after a play against Kansas, couldn't put any weight on his right foot. He was in a walking boot and crutches after the game. They were hopeful after initially examining him that he only had a sprain, maybe a high ankle sprain that would keep him out, 1 or 2 weeks. But turned out to be worse than that. They had him do an MRI, and they found a fracture there. So he's out for the foreseeable future, maybe even the season. And that's a tough blow for him because he's been their best defensive back this year, their number 1 cover corner. he did a heck of a job when Oklahoma came in, blanketing some of those receivers as good as they are and keeping them down. And he's been arguably their best defensive player this year alongside Wyatt Hubert. So that'll be a tough one for him, especially considering that Texas throws for 300 yards a game.
Right, exactly. What I was going to ask you about the game that Harry Trotter had, which was pretty amazing. The Atchison, Kansas native who ended up with 92 yards rushing against KU, and Tyler Burns as well, and how Kansas State got it done on the ground without Gilbert and Brown, but largely without Brown, who played a little bit. But I think I'd rather just talk about Skylar Thompson and what where his game has gone here in the last month. It's just he really is making a bid for all conference and other honors. He's at the top of his game, isn't he?
He really is, and the thing that's changed for him is they've let him create with his legs. They've designed runs for him. They've let him scramble, and it really seemed like during the first half of this season, they were just kind of, terrified to use him in that way. They saw what he went through with Bill Snyder and their offense and how often quarterbacks were injured in it. And I don't think they wanted to put Skylar through that this season, and they really worked as hard as they could to make him a pocket passer early on. But as each game came along, they realized that opponents were leaving the middle of the field wide open for quarterback draws. They saw against Oklahoma and Kansas that they thought they could beat him with option plays, which is something that offensive coordinator Courtney Messingham never really even did at North Dakota State. They just said, why not? Let's install it and see if it works. And neither team knew how to defend it. So he's really become a wizard down in the red zone running the ball. I think he's had 7 rushing touchdowns over the last 2 games. Kansas State has had 11 touchdowns on the ground during that same span. So him being able to run the ball has just created a whole lot of new opportunities for this offense and made things easier for him in the passing game as well. And you're right, his stats will never be as high up there as Sam Ehlinger or Jalen Hurts or some of the other big-name quarterbacks in the Big 12, but pound for pound, he's been as good as any of them the last 2 weeks.
Yeah, and the leadership qualities are there as well. I think they look at him as the unequivocal leader of this team, and when you've got a guy like that at quarterback, and a guy, as you said, is unafraid with the ball in his hands, especially at the goal line, that's quite an advantage for a team. It's Colin Klein-esque, isn't it? I mean, from back in the day and some of the other good running quarterbacks that K-State's had.
Yeah, I don't know if I'm ready to quite put him with Colin Klein yet. He was basically a fullback who could throw the ball.
Right.
Skylar Thompson's a little bit more elusive. He had a really good juke move in the last game against Kansas. What I've been more impressed about him is that he just kind of knows how to find open space. And when he does run, he normally doesn't have a whole lot of people around him, and he's pretty smart about getting out of bounds when he has to. And I think that's why this act can work for Kansas State over the long haul, because they're not asking him to do a lot of QB power and putting his body at a ton of risk. When they do ask him to run, they're plays that most people who can run quickly are going to pick up yardage.
Okay. Hey, let's switch to basketball. The Wildcats opened the season with a victory over North Dakota State. It wasn't the prettiest games, but and I think when people saw the schedule, they just assumed this will be, it's K-State, Power 5 versus North Dakota State in the Summit. But this is a better team than your normal mid-major, if you want to call them that. This was a team that returned all of its starters from an NCAA tournament team last year and was picked to win the Summit. And Kansas State got off to a little bit of a rough start in this game. But why were the Wildcats able to pull away in the second half?
Well, they played with a lot more energy on both ends of the court, which was the main thing. But really, it starts with Cartier Jada. He had just once he turned it up and started attacking the basket and getting involved on defense, the entire team was able to flip a switch and start scoring points. They went from trailing 22-21 at halftime to pulling away and winning in the second half. So they went from scoring 21 in the first half to scoring 46 in the second. So a huge change there, and basically the really only big change they made was Kansas State players quit just settling for three-pointers and decided that they could create off the dribble, get to the basket. Cartier-Jada made more than anybody else. Now, it wasn't a perfect game. He scored 23 points and needed 21 shots to get there. Not great efficiency, but on opening night, they needed somebody to step up, and it was a good sign that he did.
And the lineup was a little curious to me with Montavious Murphy starting and finishing. Did I read this right? A game-high 33 minutes in this game? Tell me about that and why did that happen?
Yeah, that was a surprise to me. He didn't start in either of the exhibition games. They actually went with Levi Stockard, who's a little older, a little bit more experienced. So I thought they'd stick with that lineup here, but Montavious Murphy does bring a little bit more athleticism, allows Kansas State to play faster. He's got a little bit better scoring touch. So I definitely see why Bruce Weber likes using him. Even as a freshman, he brings a lot to the table, and so does his backup, who's also a freshman, Antonio Gordon. I think between the both of them, they can team up and play the 4 spot pretty well for the Wildcats this season. But definitely the biggest surprise of all was that he played more than anybody else. I don't think anybody saw that coming. But he was really solid. He didn't make any mistakes on defense. He got in and was typically in the right place, knew where to pass it, knew where to go for rebounds. And, he played a lot older than his age would indicate.
And a good sign for just depth on this team, I would think. That's the best teams are, can give you kind of a depth chart by position. And if they're counting on him for those kinds of minutes or, the possibility of those kinds of minutes, that can only help Kansas State, I would think. Okay, so listen, Saturday, interesting viewing day for Kansas State fans with basketball and football kind of on top of each other. The Kansas State-Texas game starts at 2:30 on ESPN, and men's basketball is at UNLV, a 3 p.m. Central start, and that game, I think, is on ESPN 3. I don't think it's on any of the ESPN regular networks. So, what would you recommend? How would you, if you're at home, if you're watching this, if you're a K-State fan watching from home, how would you handle Saturday afternoon?
Well, my recommendation would be take your main TV and put that on the football game because that's the more important one. And it's Texas. Everybody likes to play the Longhorns. So focus on that one and then maybe bring up K-State UNLV on your iPad or your phone and just keep an eye on it. And if things get more exciting in one game or the other, maybe you can switch back or forth. It is disappointing, though, that they put those games so close together. When the schedule came out and I saw that these games were on the same day, my hope was actually that they'd put the K-State Texas football game at 11 a.m. and then have the UNLV basketball game like at 8 p.m. West Coast time or something like that, so that if you were really super dedicated and had the resources, you could maybe get to both games in the same day. Didn't happen. Put them at the exact same time. It's kind of a bummer for K-State fans. If you're trying to pick, you got to choose between a football game in Austin or a basketball game in Vegas. I mean, at least I'm sure there are people out there saying, man, I wish the football game were in Ames or something, so it would be easier to choose.
Right, and I've got to think that if this were a Kansas State home basketball game, they would have adjusted the time after they found out the starting time for football. Anyway. All right, Kellis, great stuff. Appreciate it. And when we come back, we're going to talk to Souichi Terada, who covers Missouri for the Star.
Big O Tires is rolling out Black Friday deals now to December 8th. Get limited-time Black Friday savings on oil changes, brakes, car batteries, and more. You'll also save big on tires. How big? Buy 3 select tires, get 1 free with paid installation, including brands like Nitto and Cooper. Get 4 tires, but pay for only 3. Right now at Big O Tires during Black Friday deals only through December 8th. Interest-free financing available too. For your nearest participating location, go to bigotires.com.
Souichi Terada, who covers the Tigers, joins me. How you doing today, Souichi?
I'm good. Finally getting kind of used to Columbia, so that's always a good step.
Yeah, good step. Glad you're feeling more comfortable there. And look, and you're busy. It's the football basketball crossover time, and it's always a busy time. Big football game for the Tigers this weekend. Not as big as we had hoped it would be when the schedule came out and saw the way things were going to unfold for Missouri this season with a favorable schedule, a lot of home games, and then some non-winnable, what we thought winnable conference away games leading into Georgia. There was some speculation, some talk in the preseason. Wouldn't it be great if both teams were undefeated going into this game? We know that's not the case. Georgia 7-1, back in the top 10. Missouri 5-3, and coming off of 2 dispiriting road losses. What's what's sort of the Tigers' mood going into this one?
Yeah, it was kind of interesting coming out of Tuesday, just because the 2-game losing streak does put a damper on things. I think the bye week really helped things. I mean, Barry has kind of changed the way he does bye weeks in terms of practices and everything, and not keeping guys stale and giving them the whole week off. So, but I do think the general atmosphere is that they're kind of hopeful. I mean, we saw it in Georgia versus South Carolina a few weeks ago that this is still college football. This is still 18 to 22-year-olds playing college sports, so anything can happen. I'm not too hopeful for the Tigers in terms of them pulling off an upset, but at least the team thinks that there is still a chance, so that's always a good sign.
So tell me, what's the status of Kelly Bryant?
Yeah, so it was interesting because on Tuesday, and I wrote about this on KansasCity.com, but on Tuesday, Barry said that had it been game day on Tuesday, Kelly probably wasn't going. But as of Wednesday on the SEC teleconference call, it seems like he's progressing his way towards Saturday, which is good. Absolutely. You definitely want Kelly Bryant, your starting quarterback, in there. But at the same time, I also don't – if Kelly Bryant is, not 100%, it kind of puts into questions if you want Kelly Bryant out there, especially if he might re-injure that hamstring. So kind of an interesting storyline to follow there going into Saturday.
Is there anything – you've covered these last 2 Missouri games. Is there anything to take away from the losses at Vanderbilt and Kentucky that a Missouri fan could hang his or her hat on in terms of giving them hope for the upset at Georgia this weekend? I mean, the offense was pretty dismal. How about the other side of the ball? I'm thinking about the defense. Did they play well enough to give people a ray of hope going into this weekend?
Yeah, I mean, the defense has been great this year in terms of even the last 2 weeks. I mean, they did give up a lot of explosive plays to a one-dimensional Kentucky offense. So I thought they played not great, but maybe a little bit above average. And I mean, the Vanderbilt game, yeah, sure, the Commodores took off the last 6 minutes of the game, but they still played a great game in terms of the 21, only allowing 21 points to Vanderbilt. So I think if there is a silver lining, if there is, that had to hang on, is going to be that defense. And if that defense is able to get a couple turnovers, some takeaways on the road, I think they might have a puncher's chance. It really does come down to how that defense looks, especially in that linebacking core with Kel Garrett out. So I'm curious to see how the defense looks. This is a Georgia offense that is very pro-style in terms of the running and the passing games. They can go both ways. With Jake Fromm, especially, a great quarterback. Compared to the last 2 weeks, the last 2 weeks have been very run-centric offenses. I mean, Vanderbilt played, the third-string quarterback, while Kentucky played, a wide receiver playing quarterback. So they were definitely forced to run it a bit, but Georgia will be a different monster in that they will attack that secondary, that 4-5 Missouri defense. So it should pose some challenges there as well.
Well, Missouri's actually had some nice moments against Georgia the last few years. They haven't won the games. They've only beaten Georgia once as a member of the SEC. It was down in Athens a few years ago. But there have been some decent moments. Not, I can't say they've come close, but they've been competitive in these games. A few years ago, Drew Lock had a great first half at Georgia, and last year just some bad breaks went Missouri's way, or against Missouri, I should say, and it was look, the Tigers lost. Georgia was the better team, but I think if the breaks had gone the other way, maybe that it's a little bit of a different narrative in that game. It's funny, Missouri really hasn't had much luck against Georgia, but against Florida, the next opponent for the Tigers, it's really been a different story. So I don't know. Look, the one thing that is true that you just look at statistically is the Tigers are 5-0 at home and 0-3 on the road, and this one, of course, is in Athens. So I don't know. I don't know if this is the week to think about breaking that trend, but I don't know. I would think Missouri fans, if they just see a team look a little more competitive than than they have in the last couple weeks. Maybe, that'll get them through another week?
Yeah, absolutely. And the thing is, that's kind of funny. Like, it's November now. Barry Odom coached Missouri team hasn't lost a November game since November 2016, which is crazy to think about. They were 4-0 last year, 4-0 2 years ago, 0-0 this year. So we'll see how that ends up. I'm not too hopeful that streak will continue for Barry, and I think there was a little bit of scheduling luck. But historically speaking, Missouri teams have done pretty well in November, so there are many factors to consider. It's on the road. It's against Georgia. They haven't been great against Georgia. But if there is a little positive there, if there is a little bit of hope, you can kind of look there as well.
Okay, so let's switch to basketball. The Tigers are going to play their second game tonight against Northern Kentucky. On Wednesday, they handled Incarnate Wood. A lot of good things happened. I can't tell you anything about Incarnate Wood. I should say. To me, that's the type of game where you want to see the favored team come out and take care of business and not be lethargic and be interested in the game. And it just seemed to me that's the way the Tigers played this game in their opener on Wednesday.
Yeah, it was interesting because the first 10 minutes or so, they weren't pulling away score-wise just because none of the threes, they weren't hitting any three-pointers. I think they missed 7 or 8 straight three-pointers to open the game. So the thing is, those were all open looks, so Konzo wasn't mad about them or anything. But yeah, I mean, this was a very ho-hum game. It was very comfortable. I mean, a 40-point win at home against, I think, one of the worst teams in the nation and probably the worst team on Missouri's schedule. They took care of business. It looked good. Jeremiah Tillman looked great. I mean, he had a stretch where he was blocking shots, making shots. He had a career-high 5 blocks. Xavier Pinson also had a couple nice no-look passes, just as he has done in the past. And some of the freshmen looked good. Mario McKinney Jr. had a couple of nice dunks. Kobe Brown started the game again. So there aren't too many takeaways. I mean, Konzo played 11 guys in the first 10 minutes again, just tinkering with rotations. And that's kind of what I think the game plan was, just beat down on the inferior team. So I think this game tonight against Northern Kentucky will be a much more interesting test to see how the Tigers look, because this was an NCAA tournament team last year. They bring back 4 starters. There's a lot of interesting looks to give them, and I think it'll kind of prove, or it'll kind of show what kind of team the Tigers are a little bit more.
Right, and I also thought from the box score that nobody played more than 25 minutes. Drew Smith had 25 minutes, and he got, as you said, a lot of guys, a lot of playing time. You mentioned that Kobe Brown started again, and Trey Jackson came off the bench. I'm curious about that. I know there was a lot of excitement in the recruiting of Trey Jackson and when the Tigers landed him, but has Kobe Brown just had the better preseason? Is this something to are we going to see more of this? Do you think is Trey Jackson somebody they think can bring energy off the bench? What's kind of going on with that 5th starting position?
Yeah, I think with Trey Jackson being the top 100 recruit he is, and I mean his athleticism really stands out too when he does play. I think the thing that Kobe Brown kind of brings to the table though is that he's a very willing 3-point shooter. In the exhibition win last Friday against Central Missouri, he took 9 shots, 8 of them were behind the arc. And that fits well with kind of what Missouri is trying to do in terms of they have a lot of guards. They're one guy. They're one forward. They can trust Tillman. So Brown is kind of that wing, kind of that tweener a little bit that you see in the NBA. So I think that is kind of part of it. I mean, Konzo has mentioned multiple times that Kobe has looked great in practice in terms of whether it be taking threes, driving into the hoop, and of course playing good defense, because that's what Konzo Martin is and what his Tigers are. Right. But yeah, I think Trey Jackson, I think the way it seems right now is that he's going to definitely be that spark off the bench, and I think his athleticism will really help in that regard. But right now it does look like Kobe Brown is above him in that rotation, but it is still early. Konzo did mention that Kobe did earn that starting spot, but I mean, it's difficult to project the long term for the season just because you never know with the ceilings and the floors of each individual player.
Sure. It's something we'll keep an eye on. Hey, Souichi, great catching up with you, and we'll talk to you again next week.
Yeah, absolutely.
Hey, it's Blair. Hey, we have a special subscription offer for SportsBeat KC listeners, unlimited digital access to the Kansas City Star's award-winning sports coverage. Sign up now for 1 year of Sports Pass for access to all the sports news, features, and columns we have to offer. And it's only $30. That's a 40% savings off our regular rate. For your convenience, your subscription will automatically renew after the initial term at $50 unless you tell us to cancel. A lot of subscription services won't tell you that. They'll just sneak it on there. We just told you. Your subscription helps support the sports coverage of kansascity.com and the Kansas City Star. Please visit kansascity.com/SportsBeatKC offer to get this special offer. And as always, thanks for listening. Juan Thornhill was a second-round draft selection out of Virginia, and the Chiefs believe they got a steal on draft night last April. Through the first half of the season, it looks like the team was right. Thornhill's been one of the steadiest players on the defense, and he seems to improve every week. To reach this point, it's been something of an uphill climb. He wasn't a highly recruited player out of Alta Vista High School in Central Virginia. One small D1 school wanted him to play basketball. But he landed a scholarship in Virginia and became an all-ACC performer. Thornhill spent some time with the Star's Sam McDowell in a noisy Chiefs locker room recently. We do apologize for the background noise. But here's Thornhill with Sam McDowell, and be sure to read Sam's story on the Chiefs safety who's having an impactful rookie season.
As a secondary, as a unit, it seems like you guys have really improved the past few weeks. Is there anything you can kind of pinpoint and attribute that to?
Just getting repetition and playing together, because like early in the season, a bunch of the guys was like the first time was playing together, and now that we got a few games under our belt, I mean, everyone pretty much know what the other guy next to him is going to do and the things that he liked to do, so we can play into each other's hands and help each other out.
How difficult was it, I guess, as a rookie? Because you're already learning the league and like maybe some speed stuff, but also teammates at the same time. But just the fact that maybe they didn't know each other as well.
I mean, with me, like, at Virginia, I was under two different coaching styles, and I had a coach that was really aggressive, and then I had a coach that was more laid back. And I basically had to get used to both of those. So I had a coaching change, so it made me learn early to adapt to things like that. So when I got here, it really wasn't that much of a difference, like, because I'd had a coaching change before. So I got here, and basically the thing I had to do is just learn the playbook and then get used to playing with the guys that I'm next to. So that's the biggest adjustment for me.
Anything, or any point during the season where you feel like things started to click for you?
Probably, I want to say like after maybe like fourth or fifth game. Like, because at first I felt like the game was a little fast and things were happening really fast for me. But then I noticed like into that fifth game, things started to slow down a lot, and it allowed me to make more plays. Because like at first I was thinking a lot, but now I'm not really thinking. I'm just out there playing football, having fun.
So how do you keep your confidence when you just sort of remind yourself, hey, this will come to me?
I mean, I just do my job. Like, I'm always out of confidence. You got to have confidence to play D-back. So I always step out there feeling like I'm the best defensive back on the field. Even I'm next to Tyron. Like, this dude's a heck of a player, but I'm still thinking I'm the best D-back on the field. I mean, I'm just a competitor. Like, if you say I can't do something, I'm going to try to do it. Like I told you about that. When basketball coach said I want to play at the next level, like, I just want to prove him wrong. That's just the type of person I am. And then, like, they used to wrestle me sometimes in the weight room and, like, they'll tell me I can't lift a certain weight, and I'll go in there and do it just to prove him wrong. He's just like, I'm the type of guy that always want to win at what I'm doing. So, like, I mean, it's just in me.
I've watched your YouTube clip. First of all, it's 20 minutes long, your high school stuff, which is pretty excessive. But there's a lot of pretty incredible stuff in there.
Oh yeah, like, I mean, I just put basically every play in there, like every good play that I had, and it was, I mean, the clip was just as long as it can get. And I still like put out a whole bunch of stuff that could have been in there. I mean, my senior year, I just wanted to make it really long just so I can always look back on it and see, like, my senior season.
That'll do it for another week of the Kansas City Star's daily sports podcast, a little thing we call SportsBeat KC, presented by Big O Tires. We hope you enjoyed today's show, and if so, give it a rate and review. Links to the stories can be found in the show notes, and read our college coverage on kansascity.com. Thanks to our producers, Derek Donovan and Leah Becerra, for putting together today's episode. And we'll be back on Monday with a full review of the Chiefs game at the Tennessee Titans. Hope you'll tune in.